Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today we have a returning guest, published author Rachael Wesley, who, as of today, has released her memoir, Second Set Chances, published by Vine Leaves Press. The last time Rachael was on Attendance Bias, about 3 years ago, she was working on the sixth draft of what would become Second Set Chances. At the time, she didn't have much to say about the memoir, as it was still very much a work in progress. Instead, we focused on her favorite genre of writing, creative nonfiction, and we went deep into talking about the version of Simple from August 29th, 2014 at Dick's. But this time is different. Rachael is back, and Second Set Chances is available at her website, rachaelwesley.com, vineleavespress.com, and if you need to, amazon.com. All of the links are in today's show notes. In today's episode, you'll hear how Rachael took these last 3 years to make her story a fully published work. And just as importantly for this podcast, you'll also hear us break down Down with Disease into Carini from December 29th, 2013 at Madison Square Garden. It's an incredible sequence that capped off the best year of 3.0 up to that point, and two jams that hold up 12 years later. So let's join Rachael to talk about Second Set Chances, DNA strands, and the best flavors of La Croix seltzer as we discuss Down with Disease into Carini from Madison Square Garden on December 29th, 2013. Rachael, welcome back to Attendance Bias. It's been a little while. How are you?
Oh, Brian, thanks so much for having me back. It's an honor to be a repeat guest.
There aren't a lot.
Do we get jackets like SNL?
No, well, SNL is the five-time club. So what I can offer you now is a La Croix. If you want, I could give you a cold strawberry peach sparkling water.
Dude, I haven't had that flavor yet, so I will take it.
It's good. Naturally, it says naturally essenced. I didn't know that essence was a verb.
When I see that on a can, I wonder, it makes me think of essential oils.
Yes.
And how you shouldn't consume them.
The last time you were on Attendance Bias, we talked about the version of Simple from August 29th, 2014 at Dick's. And I don't know if it's colloquially known as the Dick's Simple, but that's how I know it. That episode was released on March 22nd, 2022. So for those of you listening in the car or at home, you might want to scroll back a little bit after this episode and hear what is now the prequel episode for Rachael Wesley about the Dick's Simple, August 29th, 2014. But we are here today. We're going to fast forward 2 years, but we're also going to rewind a year in fish time to the Down with Disease into Carini from December 29th, 2013 during the New Year's run of 2013 at Madison Square Garden.
Dude, the math I was just doing in my head, zoom, 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 zoom. You mastered that.
You know what? I'm really bad at math, but fish math is the only thing that makes sense to me.
Me too.
That's it.
Like that.
I don't even need to take my socks off to count when it comes to fish math, so I can handle that. But not only are we here to talk about music, we're here for an extra special occasion, and that is the release of your book, Second Set Chances. And I can't wait to dig real deep into that toward the end of the show. So those of you listening, keep listening. Listen all the way to the end to hear about Rachael's forthcoming, can we call it a memoir?
Yes, it is a memoir. I hate that word. It sounds a little pretentious, especially coming from a no one like myself. But for lack of better terms, it is a memoir. I know there's a ton of book nerds in the fish community too. And yeah, fish and books. What better? There's no better things to talk about. At least I think.
I agree. And also, the last time we spoke about Second Set Chances, or the last time we really spoke at all on this podcast, we did have a thorough conversation about the topic of, quote, and the reason I'm quoting it is you introduced this phrase to me, literary nonfiction. And I needed you to define it at the time. It's basically the idea of writing about something fact-based or a true story, but in an entertaining way, as if it were a fictional narrative. And to me, the words or the titles that come to mind for those of you who like to read out there, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote or The Power Broker by Robert Caro Have you read any good literary nonfiction lately?
I was just checking my Goodreads out. But in the 10 books I've read this year, because I mostly read fiction just because I want a engaging narrative, and a lot of nonfiction does not do that unless we're talking about like the creative nonfiction, this literary nonfiction. So last month I read a book called Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. It was actually like absolutely brilliant. It completely read like a fiction story, kind of like Second Set Chances. Got my first plug in there. But what it's about, three women based in three different regions in the US, and it's all about their sex lives and desires. And Tadeo, the way she captured three distinct voices and points of view within this one narrative, it's a masterpiece. Highly recommend it. How about you? Have you read any really incredible creative nonfiction narratives lately?
I have, but it's not the first time I've read it. So, as everyone listening probably knows, I'm a middle school teacher. I'm getting my students ready to write their own memoirs, right? If you think you're a nobody, try being 12 years old and having to do it for the first time. So we've been reading excerpts from The House on Mango Street,
Ah,
which is a classic,
yeah.
right? It's even if no one's read it, the title that everyone kind of knows. So I've been reading excerpts from The House on Mango Street. So that's the latest literary nonfiction that I've heard. And I've also been listening to a podcast about the power broker, the biography, I guess you could call it, about Robert Moses, the designer and city planner of New York City. So I haven't quite been reading a lot of literary nonfiction of my own volition, but I have been, I guess, using it to keep myself entertained and employed.
Are you turning the kids onto the genre? Like, is it working?
Sort of. Getting kids to get excited about reading, and I've been teaching 18 years, is a lot harder now than it used to be, just because there's so many opportunities for entertainment. Although I will say, to its credit, a lot of my students love reading a lot more any series that becomes a Netflix series. So there are a lot of shows on Netflix that are aimed kind of squarely at the middle school, young adult audience that like what is it? One of Us is Dying, I think is one of them. Like these very dramatic, mostly aimed, I think, at female audiences, but just like 15 years ago or so, that young adult dystopian was very popular.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of old now. The students I have now were either born the year of or not yet born when The Hunger Games was released.
Nuts.
So I know it is, but I've been feeling old since I'm 22 because I'm a middle school teacher. So I'm always old. So to me, it just kind of rolls off my back. But stuff like The Hunger Games or The Maze Runner, that stuff that was really popular 15-ish years ago, is no longer among that set. And now it's One of Us is Lying, not One of Us is Dying, but
Oh,
One of Us is Lying. And a lot of those kind of very overwrought, melodramatic series that's like 7 books long.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really what's in and hot right now. So to answer your question, that's what turns them on to reading when it becomes a title on Netflix.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a good thing so many books get made into film and TV shows. Keep those kids reading. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, that's the positive side of channels or streaming services having an endless appetite for content, as they say. Speaking of content, the last time you were here, we went through a fish lightning round to get to know you as a fan. Today, I rearranged the lightning round because at that time when we recorded in 2022, the lightning round was just in its infancy, and I was asking every guest the same exact questions. So we're going to hear from you with some new information about Rachael Wesley, the fish fan, before we hear later about Rachael Wesley, the author. So,
ooh, I love the way that sounds, Brian.
Attendance bias lightning round.
yeah, well, we wear different faces to different audiences.
No.
But the first two questions are always the same. You already answered last time, a couple of years ago, that your first fish show was January 2nd at the Hampton Coliseum, part of the New Year's run, the reverse New Year's run of
Mhm.
that year when they came back for 2.0. But at the time, your most recent show in 2022 when we spoke was the 2021, here's more fish math,
Yep, I was thinking the same thing.
Vegas Halloween run, which was the Sci-Fi Soldier set. Now we're back here in 2025. What was your most recent fish show and what did you think of it?
Oh, I'm coming back with another very strong four-run show, Dick's this past year, which I've been fortunate enough to attend every Dick's since 2013, and wow. People talk about favorite shows from runs, and for me, there's no best. Like I could just pick any from this set of four shows, and it'll be my favorite while listening to it.
So let me ask you, now that this coming summer tour, Fish is playing Folsom Field instead of Dick's, do you feel betrayed? Are you upset? Are you glad for the change in scenery? What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
So I've only been to Folsom once for a Dead and Company show years ago when friends were in town. I was not too impressed with the venue. I'm a tiny woman with a small and anxious bladder. And I'm also a tiny woman with bad knees, so I always choose seats over floors. And Dick's was just the way it's set up, right? I guess you haven't had the chance to go yet with your teaching schedule, but just the way concessions and bathrooms are set up, it would always be a nice quick escape. From what I remember from Folsom is the bathrooms are a pain in the ass to get to. It's a pain in the ass to get to the venue. I remember taking a party bus there. Long story short, there weren't enough seats on the party bus on the way back, so my husband and I had to stand at the very back of the bus. So I am excited for the change in date because it allows people like yourself the chance to come check out some Colorado fish and just a different way to celebrate the 4th of July holiday. Like in years past, I would always spend 4th of July back in my hometown in Scranton, Pennsylvania at Peach Festival. The last several runs of that have been over 4th of July weekend. But unfortunately, it seems Peach is no more, freeing up my 4th of July weekend. So there's the positive in that. So we'll look at pros and cons.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Like we were discussing off mic, I am a Libra, so I do have to always see both sides and balance it out. In your group of friends, your fish friends, I should say, when you all get together to go to a show, whether it's Dick's or anywhere else, if you could take an outside look, looking in, what kind of role do you play? Are you the organizer? Are you the safety net who has starbursts in a fanny pack during set break? Are you the worrier? Are you the chaos agent who no one can find until maybe after the encore where you miraculously meet back up? Where would you place yourself? What role do you play within your group?
I would say I'm the Pied Piper. Even though I'm becoming more introverted as I get older, I am still at my heart an extrovert, and I love people, and I love bringing groups of people together. My friend Joanna refers to it as Rachel's, what does she call it? She calls them my stray cats. So, bringing it back to Dick's, it's a hometown show for me, but I'll bring several different groups of people together to rage the show together. Yeah, Pied Piper, I'll take it. Who are you in your group?
I think I'm the anxiety magnet, but also I think in it, I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of like the Pied Piper. I guess I'm more like if we're going to stick with alliteration, I'm like the people pleaser, where I want to be available to everybody at all times. I want to get people together. I want to meet with this person. And then my other friend texts me who's on the other side of the venue. So I feel like I have to make my way over there, even for 2 seconds to say hi and then
Maybe
come
that's
back.
where the anxiety comes from.
That's a good point. I'm glad I'm in a therapy session in the middle of a episode recording.
As an anxiety sufferer, I get it.
But yeah, I feel like I have to be all things to all people when I'm there.
It's funny, everybody fishes different, right? And again, being an extrovert and loving people and wanting to bring people together, I'm almost like the opposite. Once I have my place at a show, I am there unless I'm leaving to go get a drink or go to the bathroom. Rarely will I hoof it to the other side of the venue to see people. Occasionally. So I guess consider yourself a special person in my heart if I switch things up and come see you.
Well,
but don't take offense if I don't either.
Right. No, but I'm that way during the show. I mean, like pre-show, like making plans, because the way it works, I always think backwards is All right, well, what time does the show start? Okay, so what time do we want to get there? Okay, so what time do we have to leave our hotel? Okay, so are we going to get food before we go? Okay, if so, where is that going to be? And it just becomes this mushrooming
The
set of
pre-show
decisions.
anxiety.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. Oh, I get that too. I definitely get that too.
So that's who I am. At least that's how I see myself.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I
yeah.
can work through that as I continue to see shows. Uh, the last time we spoke, though, and this is the question I ask everybody about the weirdest thing that you've ever seen at a fish show, you said that there was a guy who was supposed to be taking care of his children who passed out in a honey bucket.
Oh, the honey
And
bucket.
yeah,
The cleanest honey buckets in all the land at the gorge.
and that was the weirdest thing you've ever seen. So I'm going to offer to wrap up this lightning round a non-fish ending.
Okay.
So, speaking to author Rachel, if you had a time machine, and you don't need to use it, but if you had access to one, and you could get writing tips or have a writing workshop from any author, living or dead, who would you like to learn from? Whose brain would you like to pick?
All right. There's so many people I could think of, but the first person who came to my mind immediately was Tony Bourdain. And those of you who read Second Set Chances will see some of the influence he's had on my life because I've made a lot of major decisions. Saying on account of Tony would be a poor choice, but I should say influenced by what I saw his life being. So, and then next to my desk on one of my bookshelves, I keep a copy of Kitchen Confidential facing me. And I also have a Tony prayer candle that a friend gifted me for my birthday a couple years ago. And then when I got back to writing, and we talked about this in our first nerdy episode, the first time I appeared on this on Attendance Bias. But when I first got back to writing, I created this goal of sorts that was based on Tony and Kitchen Confidential. So I wanted to be published by the time I was 40 because I was thinking that Tony was 40 when Kitchen Confidential came out. So it turns out when Kitchen Confidential was published, he was 1 month shy of 43. And so when Second Set Chances comes out in April, it's a month before my 43rd birthday. So that weird synchronicity of life somehow made it like happened here.
When was this show played?
So, today's show, or at least today's jam that we're here to talk about, is December 29th, 2013, specifically the opening of the second set of Down with Disease into Carini. And to give the audience some context, the 2013 New Year's Eve run was the usual December 28th to 31st at Madison Square Garden. I was there for all 4 nights. It was played after a widely loved fall tour that I could argue, and some people I would say have, is probably the best 3.0 fish. I would add up to the Baker's Dozen. I think the Baker's Dozen overtook it, but as a full tour in different venues, a traditional tour as we've come to define it, 2013 fall tour was kind of the one to see. It ended or culminated in the controversial wingsuit set, and then the 2 amazing shows after that, which also provided a lot of material for the band to explore and for us, the audience, to learn, to love and hate, depending on the song. I'm a big fan of Sing Monica.
Me too.
A lot of people are not though. So we had to
So
learn a lot of
catchy.
music. I agree. We had to learn a lot of music, and the band was introducing new music. So these shows, these New Year's shows, were the first ones after that 3-night Halloween run in Atlantic City. And the one that really took off, the song I should say that really took off, was Fuego, which is what the album that Wingsuit began as would become to known. It wouldn't really be until 2014 that those songs, Fuego, would take off. It would assume the mantle of like the jam vehicle of the time. But a lot of the fan base at this time of New Year's 2013 was kind of grumbling about the lack of new material. And then when Wingsuit was played, it kind of turned that notion on its head. And the New Year's Eve run, at least this is the way I see it, was the band's opportunity to kind of capitalize on the big new group of songs and then try and figure out what are the ones that are going to stick around, what are the ones that we're going to leave behind, and of the ones that are going to stick around, where do they go? The New Year's Eve run was fantastic. And my best memories of it all these years later, it includes that they came in playing a lot of those wingsuit songs with authority, like 555, and even The Line, Sing Monica on 1228. And the fact that each show, I remember this was a big deal in online circles before a lot of social media went to hell, is that each show, the 28th through the 31st, matched up with Phish's 28th through 31st show at Madison Square Garden. It's only been 12 years, but man, have they racked up those MSG stats in those 12 years.
What are they at as of New Year's run?
I think it's 83. That'll be in the fact check, but I think at the
Yeah.
day that we're talking now, I think it's been 83 shows at MSG.
Yeah. That is nuts.
And I also remember the big talk of it being their 30th show at MSG on December 30th, the night after we're going to talk about. It seemed to be kind of Phish serendipity to talk again about matching up different parts of your lives that match kind of a seemingly unconnected or disconnected statistic. Like, a lot of people were wondering what they would do to acknowledge their 30th year, and they didn't really do anything until the New Year's Eve Jemp truck set, for which there is a whole episode of Attendance Bias about that. And the last thing I really remember is on the 29th, on this show, they hadn't played any covers or Gamehenge songs, and that would last through the 30th, which also gave birth to the silly made-up Phish/Billy Joel, I use this in quotes, rivalry that Tom Marshall tweeted saying, quote, Phish, 4 nights MSG, all originals, no repeats. Put that bread in your jar, Piano Man, unquote.
I mean, I remember the what's the word I'm looking for? The anger, for lack of a better word, of the audacity of Billy Joel to, what did he say? Oh, who's Phish? Just a cover band, something like that, right?
And for what it's worth, that's never been verified.
Yeah. So, and look at like Trey and Billy Joel playing together recently too.
Right.
So whether that happened or not, obviously water under the bridge, or just yet another rumor, right?
Right. So who were you in the winter of 2013 that brought you to the New Year's Eve run in 2013, and that we'll find out why it was so meaningful to you?
Oh, I guess, again, to plug the book, I mean, Second Set Chances captures the 6 months of time in my life leading up to this New Year's run. I was not a happy human being. At the point of this run, I'd been living in Las Vegas for about 5 months, absolutely hating it, and looking for every chance to escape this desert sand trap. So I'm from northeastern Pennsylvania, the Scranton area. So because I'm from there, I was already in the Northeast for the holiday season. I was super resentful, just beyond butthurt, that I had missed out on the entire fall tour. So I had to make sure the New Year's run happened for me. And it did.
And to wrap it up, this part of the episode at least, why do you have attendance bias toward this performance? Because the first time we spoke, it was about a different show a year after this. It was about Simple from Dick's in 2014. So what makes you feel like this was extra special? Because you just talked about how resentful you were of missing the fall tour. So what brought this out of you when we got in touch to do a second episode?
Yeah. Again, if you read the book, you will 100% understand why I'm choosing this moment without giving any spoilers. During these songs is the climax of Second Set Chances. And also, I'm putting this out there into your audience. So for the last 12 years, I've been so curious about my show neighbors from this show and what they thought. So if you happen to be listening, show neighbors who would have no idea who I am, but if you read the book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And so if you are listening to this and you happen to read the book, please get in touch with me. I'm dying to know your thoughts.
You never know. That might happen. In Phish circles, stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the performance. So we're talking about the second set of second set chances, but the second set of December 29th, 2013, Down with Disease is the second set opener. This recording, the audience recording that I used, is unbelievably crystal clear. At this time, this is when Live Fish allowed you to download the shows, right? And at the time, I was still burning them onto CDs, right? Streaming existed, of course, but it wasn't really the go-to, at least for my listening habits.
Oh no, CDs were still very much a part of my life.
Right.
Burnt CDs, yeah.
So what I would do is I would go to a 4-set run. I would download all 4 shows, and that I would burn the highlights, as I considered them, onto maybe 2 discs or 3 discs. And this Down with Disease and this Carini were both on them. So I listened to the soundboard for years, but when I re-listened to it to prepare to speak to you, I almost prefer the audience recording. The bass is crystal clear, and that's especially important for a song like Down with Disease. That by around 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it's like the band is a machine, like a moving machine. They're not just a regular band anymore. Not that they ever are, but if you listen, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're big and their sound is heavy. Like you could hear Madison Square Garden in this recording as if it's its own instrument, the building itself.
I've been just re-listening on the Live Fish app, so I'm going to need to re-listen to both and listen for this, a redundant word. Listen. Is it even a word anymore?
Listen hard. Listen hard to this one. Because it starts, the jam does at least, with like very typical buoyant guitar-led jamming, almost like it's a new Down with Disease from like 94. But they seem a little faster than they did in 2013, like a little more driven than most versions of Down with Disease of this time.
Again, yeah, I just feel like they're making a statement. There's just, the drive behind this from start is apparent.
And then by the middle of the song, there are like these power chords by Trey. It brings things into like a different key and toward type 2. By 8.5 minutes, they've kind of settled into this groove with Fishman leading the way with whale calls on Trey's part, layering over this drum beat. It's really pushing, like we haven't reached a completely different set of music yet with Down with Disease, but you could hear they're on the verge of it for like 3 or 4 minutes going.
I don't know if it's because I'm a storyteller But a lot of times when I'm listening to songs and I'm listening to jams, especially on repeat, like you do in preparation for a podcast, right? Or if you're reviewing a show, I start getting these weird visuals that the jams put into my head, right? So around that 8:39 minute mark, you hear the piano, I can't talk now, the piano layered with the guitar, and it makes me feel like they're two separate forces, almost like two different twisters. They join together like a DNA and grab us and take us off into the orbit. It's just, and these are sober thoughts I have had.
But it works. It's true. That's how good this jam is. And then eventually they kind of settled into this, I called it a 1-2 rhythm, where the first two beats of each bar are emphasized by kind of the whole band, like bump, bump, and then they all go on for a next go round, just to kind of see what happens next. And then there's a big cheer from the crowd as things get a little psychedelic. Right before you mentioned the 9-minute mark, this is just a little after that, at around 11 minutes, there's this huge bass bomb by Mike. You could hear the entire building rattle, and then he does it again a minute later, and there's very little to follow it up. It just lets us know, hey, we're not done. We're just still jamming for what we're looking for. And then by around 13 minutes, like, things change every 2 minutes in this jam. They kind of reach this crossroads, and then they decide to go left, and it's bliss jamming. And I remember feeling completely at peace during this section. To me, this is a very 2013 kind of jam.
Again, thinking with those visuals I'm getting, when Mike drops that blast on us, I feel, hearkening back to Trey's whale call, the jam, it's just super dark and vibraty. It almost sounds as if we're in the belly of a whale. It's, I'm feeling it, and I'm hearing it now. But then when that bliss jam comes out, again, these sober thoughts I'm having, it's as if the music has lifted us out of the whale's belly and they're taking us up into the heavens, and the clouds have parted and the sun is shining down. Again,
that's how
crazy,
it felt.
sober visions. Like, it's making me, that bliss jam is making me feel like I'm levitating.
Yeah, my thoughts were, like, I know everyone has their own taste, even within the little microcosm of Phish music, that everyone likes different kinds of Phish. But my thought is, how could anyone not like this?
It's such a contrast too between the darkness of the jam that then leads. I feel like that's how I want a bliss jam to be. I want it to come out of the dark. I don't just want it to be bliss, 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 but I want, again, like a story, you get through that climax and then onto your happy ending.
Yeah, it turns into straight rock and roll, and then that kind of naturally segues back into the Down with Disease coda.
I probably listened to this song at least half a dozen times preparing for this, and I could listen to it 6 more times.
Yeah, I'm ready to press play the minute that we hang up on this call. But we're not done, because after the Down with Disease coda, right on time, I don't know how they do it, but they drop right into the Carini without missing a beat. Immediate segue into Carini. It's tight, it's sharp. And then the Carini starts into, after the song itself is over, the jam starts with this amazing funk groove. It's like, all right, we played Carini, but now let's just jam a little bit more. And when you hear Carini, at least when I do, I don't automatically think of, oh, it must be a great funk jam, as if they're playing tuba or something, you know?
Yeah. Definitely not something, at least in 2013, you would associate with Carini, right? We're talking about what a smooth, casual funk jam this is. And then around the 6:30 mark, Trey's guitar, it just changes, and it's still smooth, it's still casual, but it's this smooth, swingy sound that just, what's a band without saxophones, right? Like, I totally think that if it was a jazz band and Trey's guitar coming in, that would be like the sax solo.
It's unlike most Carinis that I've heard, and they play very much with dynamics between one another. And Fishman settles into this really cool hi-hat groove at around 7.5 minutes. And I think it's Page. I put a question mark next to this, whether or not it's Page, but I'm pretty sure it's him. Uses these synthesizers that kind of have a rise and fall sound to take over the higher end, while Fishman and Mike Gordon are still playing on the lower end.
I say this all the time, as somebody who's written a lot about music, and I don't have any background, like I can't play anything. I definitely can't sing anything. So it's just funny. We're like, oh, this is Page, right? But it's just remarkable what the sound four men can make playing together. And sometimes you just can't pinpoint who's playing what at times. I do think it's Trey. I agree with you, or not Trey, excuse me. Paige. It's really funny, those first beginning synths. It really reminds me of a trill of a bird. Like it's just so rapid, right? And then it just becomes more elongated as the beat gets a little bit faster too.
And it's fun that you say that the beat gets faster because for the most, and also Down with Disease was faster, but for the most part, this Carini has a lot of space. They really give themselves the time to play it. They are not in a rush. I know I keep using the word funky, but it is spatial. There's a lot of space in between each person playing. They're really listening to each other. Trey even goes on to his rhythm guitar at 9 minutes, which complements everything nicely. And it's my kind of fish. Paige sounds very laser focused. He's leading the way. Fishman, I use the word machine again, is playing real hard. And it's like everyone is completely locked in until about, I don't know, 14 minutes when the crowd starts wooing for the stop start. And that's when I probably sat down.
So I think I've talked about this in my first episode. Paige is my man. My ears typically lock in on him, and usually Fish is a close second. But for this jam, my ears are all about Mike. I think his bass is driving the entire jam, especially the latter third of it. With Fishman's drums, I love playing air drums, and I really want to play air drums while listening to this. But it is dynamite. Thinking back to, I'm getting off topic, sorry, ADHD, but thinking back on my love of Mike's playing in this song, in the version of this song, I also think with Dick's being the last run I saw, Mike was the total MVP of that run too. Just a little addition. Okay, back on to Carini.
Well, listen to the audience recording. And if you think that, no, but really, if you think Mike is leading it, we'll hear it like tenfold. on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
audience because he was so loud in the building.
yeah.
But like I said, when the crowd starts wooing, that's when the song ends for me. It really goes on for another minute or two, and it just kind of poofs and ends. But for me personally, the woo, I am not a
I was
wooer.
going to
I am
say,
not a fan.
tell us you are not a fan of a wooer without telling us you're not a fan of the woo.
I will. I'll tell you straight up.
I've become ambivalent about the woo. If people want to woo, woo away. If you don't want to woo, at first I was very anti woo, but maybe as I'm settling into middle age, I'm you rage how you want to rage, woo or not. But I would never woo with the wooers.
So this is the part of the show where we usually wrap it up and end, but we have an extra segment today to talk about your upcoming memoir, Second Set Chances. When we last spoke on the podcast about 3-ish years ago, 2.5 years ago, you were just beginning your journey of finding a publisher for Second Set Chances. You were also still drafting it. You were probably on your fifth or sixth draft. I've never written a book, so I might have given up on a book after 6 drafts. I might say, you know what, it's not a story worth telling.
Yeah.
But you, not only did you continue to edit, but you were already kind of thinking a few steps ahead, playing 3D chess, 4D chess, looking for a publisher. So, what was it like crossing that, I guess, mental or psychological threshold of feeling like your story was still worth telling? And
Yeah.
then taking steps to find a professional to help you share it with the world.
Oh, I thinking back to when we last spoke, I am glad I am no longer there because I was an anxiety riddled mess. I mean, even more so as a anxiety sufferer. So, uh, because this is a memoir, that hated word, because of his work of creative nonfiction, I decided even before I started writing it that my route to publication was going to be traditional or bust. So this basically meant there was no guarantee that my years of hard work would amount to anything. Like if nobody was going to publish it, then I didn't, again, it's a memoir. I didn't want to self-publish. There's a lot of dirt in here, and I didn't want to expose that dirt without somebody saying that it was good enough to expose, if that makes any sense.
You mean like
Um,
personal information and things
oh,
that you
yeah.
went through and naming other people? I assume that's what you mean.
Yeah, yeah. Well, more so, it's all of my dirt. I don't think there's too much dirt on other people. I don't think there's a lot of long story longer that doesn't need to be discussed. But the short end of it, super anxious because I had been working my ass off for years on this, and I didn't know if I was going to either score an agent who would represent me or go directly to a small publisher who wanted to publish my manuscript. But also, in complete contradiction to all of that anxiety and self doubt, I was just so sick of working on this project. It had already been, I started writing it in 2019, and this was what, 2022? So,
2022,
yeah,
yes.
I'd been working on it for almost 3 years, and I just wanted to get it out of my hands, be done with it, and ready to get to work on the next project. But again, still so nervous and anxious that it wasn't good enough to be sent out yet.
Well,
Long story longer.
well, what is it? I've read it, so I know what it's about. But for the listening audience, can you briefly tell attendance bias listeners in an elevator pitch what is Second Set Chances about?
I don't have an elevator pitch yet, and this would have been the perfect opportunity. But I'm struggling with it, Brian. Maybe you could help me out with one.
So
I did a
I'll tell you my elevator pitch.
okay.
It's about a woman it's a memoir about a woman who is in an unhappy relationship and tries to come to her own senses and make the changes necessary to become happy.
Well,
What's
thank you.
wrong? What's right and what's wrong with my elevator pitch?
I think it's great. I did a radio interview a couple weeks ago, and somebody asked me for the elevator pitch, and oh man, I blanked out as I'm known to do. So I will take that and run with it. I like to. I when I started writing this, I had a hook of sorts, and it was something like weeks before a marriage-saving move to Las Vegas. Rachel takes off her wedding ring before a fish show and randomly encounters an old college crush.
That's a good hook.
So we could combine your elevator pitch with my hook, and I'll craft the perfect pitch.
I like it.
I'm going to need to have an elevator pitch. So thank you.
And I'll take points on the back end once Oprah selects it for her reading club.
I'll take Reese's or Jenna's reading club too.
So I just want to ask one more time about the dirt, about the dirty part in it. So
Yes.
is it just that you were a little afraid to put things in that made you feel vulnerable? Or
Yes.
when we talk about facts, is everything in it true?
Yes. I mean, being human, it's a dirty, messy thing. And we don't, as much as we always want to be the good guy in our lives, we do real and human things and we make mistakes along the way. And I've done things I'm not proud of and things I've learned from. And looking back, I would have done things so much differently. Again, it's real life. It's messy. So I just wanted to get the truth out there. With so much of my writing, it's dirty, it's messy, it's graphic. How do you get people to feel more comfortable with life and living and doing things, right? And it's all about, to me, transparency. Like, hey, I've done this, I've experienced this, it happens, right?
I think that's the purpose of storytelling.
Yeah.
I think that's it. So you're on this podcast, and it's not an accident because you even in your elevator pitch or your hook, the band name Fish comes up. So if you were selling this book to a non-fish fan, what parts of it would you emphasize?
So much of it is not fish related. I mean, there is a lot of fish content, but there's also a lot of non-fish content. I mean, you were gracious enough to read it and provide an endorsement blurb, and you yourself said you enjoyed reading the non-fish stuff more so than the fish related things. I've also had several non-fish fan, like professional book reviewers, read it and provide feedback. And these are people I don't even know. And they've said things that have brought me to tears.
In a good way.
In a good way. Like one woman lives across the world. She reviewed my book and she said in a very lengthy review, like she took the time and wrote like a 5-paragraph review, which again, just having somebody put that time and effort, it's tear inducing. It's just, I'm overwhelmed by it. But this woman said, and I quote, "It's quite unputdownable." So to have a non-fish fan say that, like, wow, thank you. Another person said, she said, "I have read many indie books, and this is one of the most well-constructed in terms of actual writing ability." That was just another thing. I read it and boom, I'm crying. This whole thing is very emotional, Brian.
Of course it is. And then what is in it that you would sell to hardcore fish fans who might not otherwise pick up this book based on reading the back blurb?
So a huge part of my identity is being a fish fan, as I assume it's the same for you and a lot of your listeners, right? At its heart, this book is like a love letter to fish, amongst many other things, but also through its pages. The book, it opens up with the SPAC run in 2013. The middle of it covers Dick's 2013, and then the end is all about that New Year's run that we are dissecting today. So a lot of fish content, a lot of not fish content, a perfect intertwining of both, like that Trey and Paige joining together in
The
some
DNA strand.
Yeah.
So as of today, where and when can people find Second Set Chances by Rachael Wesley?
Oh, I love the way that sounds. You're gonna bring me to tears. So my pub date, today is March 2nd when we're recording this. My pub date is April 8th, which I think is such an auspicious date because it's one of my closest friends' birthdays, and she's also in Second Set Chances. So my pre-order is open. So you could head on over to my website, rachaelwesley.com. Or you could head over to my publisher's website, vineleavespress.com. And you can pre-order that. You'll also be able to, like, if you live in Denver or happen to be in northeastern Pennsylvania, because I'll be spending a lot of time there, you could buy a book directly from me. If you happen to be in Denver or the Front Range, Colorado on April 12th, head on over to Over Yonder Brewery for my launch party. It's going to be a real good time. It will be available on Amazon, but I know we're all trying to feed that beast a little less in support of smaller businesses. So I would say last case scenario, get it on Amazon, but try not to. Yeah, that's where you could get it.
Well, Rachael, thanks for coming back onto Attendance Bias, sharing even more about yourself and telling us about your experience at the New Year's Run, December 29th, 2013. And most importantly, telling us about your upcoming memoir, Second Set Chances.
Brian, thank you so much for having me on again. And I want that LaCroix for my second appearance. And I hope you and I get to rage a show in person in a couple of months.
Well, at least we know the anxiety will be off the charts as we get ready to leave.
Yeah. I will see you soon, I hope.
Cheers. And that's it for today's episode with Rachael Wesley. We didn't discuss too much fish today, but just the same, we want to make sure we got every little thing right with an attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
The young adult novel whose title I couldn't think of in the moment is One of Us is Lying, Not One of Us is Dying, by Karen McManus. It was followed up by 2 sequels and then adapted for a limited series of 3 seasons on the Peacock streaming service. The only other fact that I had to double check is that if my calculations are correct, Fish has played Madison Square Garden 91 times as of this recording. But that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Rachael Wesley for joining me today. I'd like to thank Fish.net for their help with the fact check, Fish.in for the recording used in today's episode, and the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to support music education in schools. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app, and you can follow Attendance Bias on social media. You can also support the podcast by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.